For 30 years, studying the female soul, Sigmund Freud admitted, "I still cannot answer the greatest question of all, what does a woman want?" And perhaps he wasn't lying. But there's one thing Freud understood better than anyone. And it's so unsettling that the modern world deliberately looks away. A woman does not choose you because of who you are. She chooses something else. She chooses what she wants to see in you, whether it exists or not. You think you're loved because you're special? No. In truth, you're being measured, scanned through her gaze, through her imagination, through her unconscious needs. You are not seen as you truly are. You're filtered through a lens where you're merely a temporary character for the script she's writing in her head. Don't mistake attention for understanding. Don't confuse affectionate eyes for genuine recognition. Freud discovered that female desire operates in ways no man was ever taught to protect himself against. It's not a choice of reason, and it's certainly not a choice rooted in your essence. It's a selection born from a psychological narrative, searching for its leading actor. And that role can change at any time. If today she looks at you with admiration, tomorrow she might look at you with disappointment, simply because you no longer fit the fantasy she's secretly constructing. Think this sounds absurd? Then ask yourself this simple question. If she looked at you with different eyes, would you still feel like yourself? That gaze holds the power to shape how you perceive yourself more than you realize. A woman's inner world is like a floating mask, constantly shifting shape according to moods, désir, and unspoken needs. The man standing before that mask thinks he's being admired, being loved. But in truth, he's being measured, assessed, adjusted, even reconstructed within the silent theater of her imagination. You may believe you're the one making the choice. But no, from the moment she lays her eyes on you, you've stepped into an audition for a script you were never handed. So the real question is, when that gaze shifts, when that mask changes form, what will be left of you? A man standing firm, or just a shadow fading in someone else's memory? Perhaps you think you already understand this. But the truth runs far deeper. Because even when you know she doesn't see you for who you truly are, you still fall into this trap over and over again. Freud understood this well, not because he guessed, but because he witnessed it firsthand in the therapy rooms where the deepest secrets of desire were laid bare. One of his most famous patients, Anna von Lieben, was the first woman who helped Freud realize the false veil society had woven around the concept of female desire. On the surface, she was a refined Viennese aristocrat. Beneath it, a chaotic darkness of forbidden cravings. She confessed to fantasies of submission, power, even violence, the very things every moral book of the time claimed women did not possess. Freud realized she didn't truly crave any specific man. What she craved was the image of a man that her own mind had constructed to satisfy those impulses. And that was the key. Female desire isn't looking for something real. It seeks an image. The case of Dora, the young girl made famous in Freud's writings, makes this even clearer. Dora's parents brought her to Freud because of her hysteria, because of her contradictory accusations against a man who had harassed her. But Freud uncovered a more brutal truth. She wasn't disgusted by that man the way she thought. She was aroused by the very notion of prohibition, by rejection, by the ambiguous kind of power no one dared to admit. So what's the truth? That man didn't matter. Who he was didn't matter. What mattered was the archetype he activated within her mind. And this is what Freud uncovered about women. What they desire has never been the real man. It has always been the image in their mind, distorted through the mirror of their unconscious needs. You stand there, thinking you are facing a woman, but in truth, you are standing before a mirror that does not reflect your true self, but the image she needs you to become. A different man, a man who never truly existed, a man who can be replaced at any moment if that image no longer fits the narrative she's constructing in her mind. This is what people call projection. And when she projects that archetype onto you, you cease to be yourself. You become a supporting character in the script she's writing. And that script can change every day. Today, you might be the hero she needs. Tomorrow, you might be the weak man she needs to feel superior. Everything revolves around the unfolding needs of her inner story. You have no control over this. What shocked Freud was not the intensity of female desire, but the way it operated through invisible patterns. Archetypes, those primordial molds, those symbols ingrained into the unconscious through thousands of years of human history. She does not love you. She loves the fragment of an archetype within you that fits the movie she's already writing. When that fragment fades, she no longer needs you. And that is why you can pass through a woman's life with all the sincerity, kindness, and love you have. But the moment you no longer fit the role she needs, she will look at you as if you never existed. The desired isn't the real. What she craves was never truly you. It was a phantom she created, reflected through you. And the day she no longer sees that image, there's nothing left of you at all. You might think this only exists in psychology, in imagination, in the vague layers of the unconscious. But Freud and the scientists who followed him proved that female desire is not just a matter of the mind. It is rooted deeply in biology. And it's there that you'll find an even more unsettling truth. In 1953, Alfred Kinseeth, father of modern sexology, conducted a series of experiments to measure women's physiological responses when exposed to different sexual scenarios. The results were so shocking that he chose to hide them for the rest of his life. The women participating in these experiments said they preferred romantic stories, gentle scenarios, tenderness, understanding. But their bodies told a different story. Their strongest physiological responses came when exposed to stories involving coercion, rejection, even danger. Reason said no, but instinct said yes. Kinsey knew that if he published these findings, the rising feminist movement would turn against him. And so, he buried the data in silence. But Freud wasn't surprised. He had already written, "Rejection is what ignites desire." A woman might say she wants gentleness, safety, care. But if you understand the biology of female desire, you'll realize the opposite is often what keeps her mind spinning. One of the most fascinating thought experiments about female instinct comes from something Freud hinted at. Imagine a woman standing before two doors. One door opens to light, safety, tender promises, stability, arms always open to welcome her. The other door is shrouded in darkness, filled with ambiguity, danger, unpredictability, a place where she has no idea what awaits her on the other side. If logic were in charge, she would choose the light, but instinct pulls her toward the dark. Because what activates the strongest reward center response in the female brain isn't satisfaction, it's contradiction. Modern neuroscience shows that the female pleasure center, the reward centers, most powerfully activated, not when she gets what she wants, but when she's pulled into a cycle between hope and rejection, closeness and distance, control and loss of control. That's why men who are too predictable, too willing, too safe, almost never sustain a woman's desire for long. Not because they aren't good enough, but because they aren't contradictory enough, not elusive enough, not complex enough to activate the pursuit through uncertainty mechanism deeply embedded in the female subconscious. Women don't crave what they already hold in their hands. What they crave is the door that's never fully open. And if you think you can reach a woman's heart through absolute kindness, endless patience, unconditional giving. You are forgetting a fundamental truth. Her desire does not operate on logic. It operates on instinct, on the thrill of pursuit, on the ache of absence, not the comfort of possession. Freud understood this long ago, but the world refused to listen. And if you think this all ends with instinctive reactions in a laboratory, you're underestimating how female desire has been shaped, evolved, and operates in the modern world. In fact, today's reality only makes everything Freud once warned about even clearer. Look at dating apps like Tinder, where everything seems to be built on principles of fairness, modernity, and progress. But numbers don't lie. A 2018 study by the University of Oslo found that 85% of women rated 90% of men as below average in attractiveness. Not bad, not average, below average. In the eyes of most women, the majority of men aren't even worthy of consideration. This isn't coincidence. This is instinct speaking its truth. The good, menstable, predictable, always available, always waiting patiently, always open-hearted dare, often the first to vanish from the cycle of female desire. Because desire was never meant for what's easy to grasp. Desire thrives on tension. It lives on the razor's edge between hope and disappointment. It needs push and pull, mixed signals, doors that are never fully open nor fully closed. The clearest image for this is the man standing at the center of a maze, where every path carries an ambiguous sign. Yes, no, maybe, never. The man walks forward, not knowing where any path will lead. And the woman, she isn't drawn to clear answers. What keeps her watching is the man bold enough to keep moving without promises, without validation, without a guaranteed map. Because it's precisely that unpredictability that creates desire. Nice guys always finish last. Not because they aren't good enough, but because they're too easy to read. Predictable, linear, flat. The moment you expose all your feelings, all your intentions, all your goodwill, you vanish from the landscape of her desire. Scarcity beats availability. What is rare keeps people restless. What is too available makes people indifferent. That's not just a rule of economics, it's a law of psychology. Smart men understand one crucial truth. Frame, control, is everything. You don't need to manipulate. You don't need to lie. But you do need to understand that the one who controls the tempo, the slow, the fast, the silence wins, the emotional game. Polarity is the fuel of desire. Without tension, there is no attraction. Without challenge, there is no desire. A man who understands this will never rush to unlock the door he holds. He carries the key, but he does not use it right away. He leaves the door slightly ajar. He leaves behind unanswered questions on the other side. And it's precisely this that keeps her hooked. Because in the darkness of that maze, the only thing she wants to know is, why? Why has that door never fully opened? Why does this man feel no need to prove himself? To chase? To explain? Why is it him who makes her the one who has to seek? When you understand this, you understand the true nature of female desire in this era. And when you understand that her desire doesn't lie in what she says, but in the doors never fully opened, you begin to see a deeper layer own Freud identified by name, Animus Possession, the phenomenon where a woman is unconsciously controlled by the idealized male figure in her psyche without even realizing it. Freud discovered that within the subconscious of every woman exists a symbolic image of the perfect man, strong, unwavering, mysterious, and always just out of reach. This image isn't real. It's constructed from novels, films, fantasies, and past wounds. And it's this image, Not you. That she's truly chasing. Real men, flesh and blood. With sincere emotions. With gentle patience. Often become victims of this unconscious game. Because no matter what you do, you can never measure up to something that doesn't exist. She wants perfection from a man living only in her imagination. And you, no matter how hard you try, are merely a temporary placeholder. That's why the harder you try to please her, the deeper you sink into the cycle of frustration. The clearest image of this is the man turning into stone silent, motionless, lifeless each time he tries to meet the expectations of a fairy in a woman's mind who never truly existed. You gradually become an object on display, no longer your authentic self. You exist only to reflect expectations, no longer having a voice for your own needs. Freud called this possession. Not that you are possessed, but that she is possessed by the animus figure, the man in her imagination, the one dictating her gaze, her emotions, her choices, without her even realizing it. She thinks she is choosing you, but in reality, she is searching for someone who fits that elusive image. And when you no longer fit, she will look for someone else. Understanding this, a man no longer craves approval. Because you know you cannot win in a game where your true opponent is a fantasy. You understand. You don't need to explain. You don't need to change. You don't need to do anything to become the right man in the eyes of someone living in illusion. When you realize she never truly saw you, you stop longing to be seen. And when you let go of that need, that's when you reclaim your power. No one can imprison a man who fully understands the nature of the game he's in. When you understand that your real opponent is nothing more than an illusion, you begin to see why so many men out there are still trapped in a loop they cannot escape, even though they lack neither morality, nor kindness, nor effort. Freud witnessed this more than a century ago. In 1908, he treated a man named Edward, a young, promising lawyer who had fallen into a state of prolonged melancholy, drained of energy, completely numb to life and sexuality. Edward was the ideal model society praised, highly educated, polite, financially stable. He did everything society told him a good man should do. He was kind, accommodating, self-sacrificing. Yet, his wife despised him. She openly mocked his weakness, flirted with other men in front of him, and eventually left him for a crude factory worker with a criminal record. Freud diagnosed Edward's condition as moral castration, the self-castration of one's masculine instincts in exchange for approval from society, from women, from surface-level moral values. He had been taught to bury his instincts, his pride, his inner masculine strength, just to become a model of pleasantness, forgiveness, and disposability. But this tragedy didn't end in the past. It's still happening today, repeating itself in millions of men who believe they are doing the right thing. Another example is Michael, a 32-year-old engineer I once knew. He embodied everything modern society praises. A feminist, a good listener, empathetic, always remembered anniversaries, always prioritized his girlfriend above himself. He cooked, cleaned, shared the housework, supported her career wholeheartedly. And then one day, she left him. Not because he was bad, not because he betrayed her, but because he was too safe, too kind, too predictable. The words she left him with as she walked out of his apartment were, "I love you, but I don't feel anything anymore." This is the loop of the upside-down hourglass. The sands no longer fall. Time no longer moves forward. Only erosion remains. These men are trapped in an endless game where they believe that the more they suppress their instincts, the softer they become, the more predictable they are, the more they will be loved. But the truth is, the more they lose themselves, the more invisible they become. This is moral castration, a sweet sacrifice wrapped in the name of virtue, but in reality, it is a self-imposed sentence that destroys self-respect, strips away the masculine power inherent within them. When you understand this, you will see why modern men are increasingly exhausted, increasingly lost, not because they lack effort, but because they are putting their effort into giving up the very thing they were meant to protect within themselves. And when you understand why good men today are increasingly exhausted, you'll also realize that the solution isn't to become cruel or heartless. You don't need to become a monster. You simply need to understand the true nature of the game. What women crave isn't gentle predictability. It isn't endless care. And it certainly isn't a man who willingly lowers himself to please them. What keeps them hooked is the untouchable. What they truly desire is a man who cannot be easily possessed, cannot be easily understood, cannot be easily manipulated by cheap emotional tactics. The clearest image of this is a door left slightly ajar, not fully closed, not fully open. It creates confusion. It sparks curiosity about what lies beyond. But the more they try to enter, the further the door seems to retreat. A man who understands this will not chase, will not explain, will not pursue validation or the gaze of anyone. He knows his true value does not lie in being acknowledged, but in preserving his own mystery, maintaining a territory of emotion no one can casually invade. Silence becomes power. Controlled indifference becomes a wall no one can cross. And it's precisely that space, that absence, that keeps women wondering, searching, obsessing. Not because they want to break the door down, but because they cannot stand the thought of a man who exists freely, untouched, who doesn't need them, who doesn't seek validation from anyone. That is what they truly desire. And when you understand this, you'll realize you no longer need to walk through any door that was never meant for you. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to beg for anyone's recognition. What you need is to step off the stage someone else built for you. The final image you should remember is a man quietly walking away from an abandoned stage, where the lights have gone out, the audience has left, and the applause was never sincere. He walks away without regret, without looking back, because he understands one truth. True power never lies in being loved or hated, accepted or rejected by others. True power lies in no longer allowing others to define who you are. You were never powerless. You were just misled. You were never weak. You were simply taught to live for the approval of others. If you understand this now, leave a comment below. Liberate. Not for anyone else to know what you think, but to remind yourself that you have stepped out of the invisible trap where so many other men remain silently imprisoned. This is not the end. This is the first time you are truly beginning to live in alignment with who you are.